Welcome, lovely listeners, to SoulStirred, stories of growth and the human experience. I'm Emily Garcia.
And I'm Kasey Clark.
We will be your guides on this journey. We are so glad you are here.
Each week, we'll come together, sometimes with other incredible thinkers, creators, and adventurers, to generously share stories of self-discovery, recovery, triumph, and what it means to live a life on purpose.
No matter where you are in your own journey, connection is here for you at SoulStirred.
Settle in, take a deep breath in, and let's inspire each other.
Welcome to SoulStirred. Today we're back talking about the story of us. We thought we were recording a chapter 3 story of us a while back, and it turns out that Kasey and I just get into our own conversations and it went somewhere else. And so it occurred to us that we left you all hanging, and we have heard from some listeners that they are ready to hear the next part of this journey. So today we are here to tell you about what happened next. Because in chapter 2, Kasey and I were talking about working in a local county doing child welfare work. And I left that position after I had graduated with my master's in social work and got my first job as a therapist. And Kasey was there. And so today, I want to hear about you, Kasey. What happened for you when I left that county? Where did you go? How long were you there? What was going on for you? You could start with any part of that.
Yeah, wow. That was a lot, right? And yes, I'm excited. Our listeners have said they are on the edge of their seats to hear the next chapter in the story of us. And also thank you for the grace that we have incredible chemistry with each other. And sometimes we let that chemistry carry us away. As was the case the last time we tried to release chapter 3, part 1. So here it is, the true tale. You left, I believe, to go work in a school, right? As a social worker after getting your master's.
Contracted in as a therapist in a school.
Yeah. Very cool. And I stayed at the county, supervising the after hours intake team, which was mostly responsible for like the 24-hour a day crisis response work. Until I don't know how many years. I'm not good at recalling along a timeline necessarily, so I'll just give you the narrative version. Until it occurred to me that one of the things that I loved most about supervising the team that Emily was on was teaching people how to do the job. I loved that kind of work, like taking younger, more novice workers out into the field and showing them the ways to build relationship and connect with families who are experiencing sometimes the most troubling times in their life. And so I decided that I wanted to apply for a job with, at the time, it was one of our major local universities who had a contract to train all of the state's new incoming social workers, social caseworkers who were going to be doing the work of child welfare. So I left the county to go become a trainer. And I loved that, actually, because I got to learn so many things about the work that we had been doing that I never really understood as fully or completely as I had to come to understand them in order to teach them to others. And so it was interesting because I loved being a trainer for a little while, and I did it for a little over a year. And then I was hit with this burst of like, I want to go back into county government. I feel this pull to go back into the field. And if I'm being totally honest now, it's because after about a year of training, I got a little bored. It was kind of like saying the same things over and over, week after week, to a new class of people.
Yeah.
And what I recognize now at this point in my life, as I share this part of the story with you, is that was probably my nervous system recovering, right? that I was feeling bored in the training environment and longing for the chemical hits of let me go back into the crisis response work.
The
Um,
excitement of trauma.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that reality is here too. Anyhow, what happened was after training for a little time and then wanting to go back into the county, I went back to the county, and it was at a time when there was a really big shift happening in the system in terms of how the child welfare agencies interact with the community. Some people would have even called what was happening a movement. It was a movement towards this thing called differential response, which was just an academically fancy way of saying that the county child welfare system was trying to learn how to share some of its power with the families that it served.
Mm.
And I had been selected to be one of the first of those kinds of workers. So to explain what this means in a brief and hopefully bottom line up front kind of way for our listeners, um, child welfare services had previously operated in a way that was very much sort of in partnership with law enforcement and considered the work of caseworkers with families to be something of an investigation. And I think the families would agree that it felt like an investigation to have a social caseworker show up and ask you questions about how you've been parenting your child, and in a way where really those of us that represented the department held all of the power
Mm-hmm.
because we were empowered by the judicial system and the law enforcement system to remove children from the home if we believed there to be risk of harm or that the kids were in some sort of safety threat or danger. So previously, that's how things had operated, and this movement was happening that was wanting to be more of what I would call like traditional social work. We're actually here to help. We want to partner with you more than judge you. We want to understand you more than make conclusions about you, and we want to get you resourced with the support that you need, more than we want anything here to feel like punishment. And the goal was all so that children and families could stay together, so that
Right.
nobody had to be moved anywhere. And so I really wholeheartedly believed in this movement and was really honored to be one of the initial operators of it. I remember coming home from having met with a family. It was a young set of parents who had three very small children, like 3, 2, and an infant, and being able to sit down and get to know them and understand their circumstances. They were living in a motel, but ultimately, I was able to take them down to the local Walmart and help them purchase diapers and baby formula and the clothes that they needed, and give them a little cash so that they could stay where they are long enough to, secure a more permanent circumstance. And I remember coming back to the office after meeting with those folks and saying to my supervisor at the time, like, this is the work. Like, this is why I was called to this work.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to help people in a way that feels like help to them. Um, anyhow, I say all of that to say, because I stayed with the county for another couple of years because of that change and the fulfillment I was then getting out of doing my job. And then my supervisor at the time, who is a person who I to this day respect and adore and admire, um, I discovered she was about to retire. And I didn't know that she was about to retire when she came to me one day and said, look, I just went to this training that was put on by this national organization that's responsible for forwarding the action for both child welfare and animal protection and animal welfare. And it was a phenomenal training. And I think you should go apply for a job to work for them.
Wow.
And I said, what? I don't want to. I just got back to county child welfare. I've only been back a couple of years. I love the work that we're doing. And she said, do it for me. I just want you to apply. to see what's possible. And if you don't feel like it's the right time for you, I want you to just to explore this possibility and do it for me.
Mhm.
Well, it turned out that that was because she was planning her own retirement a few months later. And what I didn't know was she was sort of trying to care for each of her ducklings, if you will. Before she left the agency, she kind of wanted to get us all outplaced
Situated.
into situations that she felt were better for us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I applied for this job at this national training organization and I got it. Um, and I was surprised by myself that I got it. It was actually an interesting story because it was a national training job, and so I remember for the interview they had wanted each of the candidates to bring a copy of like a curriculum we had created, including a PowerPoint deck. And be prepared to like give a presentation, like a little snippet, a 20-minute sample performance, if you will, of the curriculum you had created. Emily, I was a caseworker. I
Yeah.
had never written a curriculum. And when I had left to go work at that other university, I was a trainer, but different people wrote curriculum. I was like handed the script, and my job was to deliver the script, but I had never created the script. Well, because this supervisor that I adored and admired wanted me to explore the possibility of this role, and I wanted to be successful in that exploration process. And so I figured it out. I sort of faked it until I made it. I sat down at my computer and wrote a sample curriculum, including a PowerPoint deck, and I gave them the 20-minute presentation. And even though there was a part of me telling myself a story, you've never done these things before, I did them, and I did them with success because I got that job.
Wow.
And so what ended up happening next was I ended up on the national stage and ironically training that same sort of movement, that differential response work. I became one of the people who was leading other state social service agencies in how to make those shifts.
I just have
Um,
to say that this is like if someone says, "Oh, I'm not a salesman," I would hate to do sales. It's not really about like I need to sell you a product, but if there's something that you really love, you're a
mhm.
natural salesperson for it. So like you loved differential response, so
Yeah,
naturally you were able to explain to other people why you loved it.
right. Yeah. And get them enrolled in wanting to operate that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was a lot of fun, to be quite honest, what happened next, because the particular contract that we had for helping to implement this differential response movement was with the state of New York. And so for about 5 or 6 years of my life, I ended up flying back and forth from Denver to New York every week,
Wow.
and training people out in New York how to do this job. And it was fascinating what that was like for me and how much I learned from that experience. Suffice it to say, having grown up and basically born and raised in Colorado, Colorado and New York have two very different cultures, types of
Yeah.
people, and
Yes.
by culture, this it shows up like in how you think, how you speak, how you dress, how you behave. One of the things that I noticed along this journey was when I was a trainer in Colorado, the incoming caseworkers, they sort of showed up for training like knowing how to be trained. And what I mean by that is people generally show up on time. They come in and they sit down at the tables. They start looking through their materials. When the trainer or teacher approaches the front of the room, people get quiet and give you their attention and are like ready to learn.
Yeah.
Not the case in New York. In New York, all of those same things, I'm standing in the front of the room and all of the people come into the room. And what would happen next felt to me very much like, we'll give you our attention when you earn it.
Oh, wow.
If like if you want our respect, you can earn that too. Um, and so all of that is to say, it really grew me. It humbled
Mm-hmm.
me and it grew me, this experience. And I loved it. I made some of the very best friends of my life, with some of the women who actually work and still live in New York, who I got to like co-lead these classes with and learn with and from. It just really was a big, uh, it felt like I had arrived at a time where I was really getting to do work that came naturally to me, where I was on purpose with it, and it had great meaning. This was like change the world kind of
Hmm.
stuff, because
I want to
the
know how you earned them listening to you. What did you
yeah,
have to do?
right. A little bit of like performative song and dance blended with knowledge and credibility building.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and really being willing to listen. I think that was the most important thing. Like understanding the context of these conversations was such that what we're doing is coming in and offering you a new way of doing work that you care very much about.
Right.
It's difficult in a space like that for people not to hear a message that sounds a little bit like the way you've been doing it is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took a very sort of crafty and artistic blend of like appreciating all of the strengths and the skills and the gifts that were already there, while also ever so subtly coaching towards an alternative.
That's a parallel process. That here
Absolutely.
you are with the caseworkers who are going out and doing the work, and they're going, "Are you going to join me, or are you here to tell me how to do it? And you don't know anything, lady from the outside," just like it is for them going into someone's home. Are you here
Exactly.
as the authoritarian, or do you want to understand my family from my perspective and help me?
Totally. Totally the parallel process in action.
Yeah.
Yeah. And um yeah, I remember one day, I'll just share a very vulnerable story. I was in a suburb of New York City training and coaching with a room full of human services professionals and kind of banging into them one of the concepts or ideas from this process that we were teaching. And one of them said, "Wait, um, you're sitting here telling us not to be judgmental with our clients when it really feels like you're being judgmental with us."
Whew.
So, yeah, navigating those moments is what I'm talking about when I say I had to earn the credibility and the respect. And it was earned through humanity, through
Right.
my willingness in moments like that to say to the woman who was brave enough to tell me how I was impacting her, "You know what? You're right. You're right. So maybe now's a good time for us to just take a pause and like have a deep breath and then recenter
Mhm.
ourselves that this is not you versus me. This is you and me together,
Right.
trying to craft what could be the best possible version for us to have as an impact with a family."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it took, that takes a lot of skill, and emotional intelligence in moments like that to get criticism publicly, and be able to breathe it in and accept it as truth and repair and recover the relationship right in that moment.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say I learned as much from them as they did from me, and I ended up really making dear friends.
Right.
I
That's
think built on the basis of mutual respect. Yeah,
it's there's that quote, and I may butcher it. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That
yeah,
no matter what role you're in, if they don't know that you care about them, it doesn't
mhm,
matter. You could
yeah,
say anything and it could be 100% true and it doesn't matter because
mhm,
they need to know that you care.
yeah, yeah. And the other attribute, if you will, from that experience that I'd like to share here, because I think I'm kind of on a mission to get this message out in the world right now again, too, is um, acceptance of this idea that things want to change and that things can change without having to make how they have been bad or wrong.
Right.
Like it's just evolution, it's just
Hmm.
movement. We don't have to go back to, I'm leaving this job, and so in order to let you leave this job, I have to make up that you were the worst person I ever worked with in the world. Right? Like what I don't know why we do that. It's like it helps our hesitance to let go, maybe
Right.
to have to hate something a little
If
bit
you
or
were a horrible person, then good, I can go away from you.
exactly.
Or if this job was horrible, good, I can go away from.
Yeah. But
Guilty
what if
as
we didn't
charged.
have
I've
to
had
do that
moments of
part?
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, what if that part didn't have to happen? What if
Right.
it's like, oh, something, another opportunity emerged for you and you're going to go take it. And I have loved our time together, every minute of it. Just more
Yeah.
of that accepting and allowing. So, um, interestingly, I got to keep up that work in New York for about 5 or 6 years. And what happened next was interesting. It wasn't really so much a change that I chose consciously as much as it was a systemic and organizational one. But that company that I worked for decided to get out of the child welfare business.
Mm.
And so the team that I was a part of sort of broke up and went in a couple of different directions, each to two different local universities. Um, and that was all interesting too, but it's a story for another day. And then what happened next? Well, this was actually big and breaking news in Colorado at the time. I don't know if you remember, but fast forward now, and we're at about 2012, and very sadly, we had 13 children who were in the care and custody of the Department of Human Services lose their lives that
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And so Nine News did a week long expose. What it said, its language was exposing the child welfare system, and the expose was called Failed to Death. Um, and the result of that was that our governor at the time, Hickenlooper, formed a task force to say to the community, what are we going to do about this problem? The Department of Child Welfare exists to keep our children safe, not to help them, be fatally injured. And so something needs to change. And the system's response, like the task group's solution, if you will, was training. Now, again, this is another episode for another time. I could talk about how training is often found to be both the problem and the solution to
Hmm.
things that ail the system, and that training can't actually activate those changes all by itself.
Right. Yeah.
But the sake of this conversation is my story. And so what happened next was the governor created this task force created a grant opportunity to the tune of $25 million for a team of people to create what he coined the nation's very best child welfare training system. And when that grant occurred, some colleagues, friends of mine, were at this university. These people I had worked for previously at the agency that had us training in New York, um, preparing to respond to the grant proposal, and they won the award.
Hmm.
And so the next act, if you will, was to build a dream team of people to run this project, run this grant for the state, and create the best training system in the world. And so one of my former co-workers had contacted me at the university where I was at and said, I want you to come be a part of this dream team. And they hired me over to work on that child welfare project as a leadership coach, or I was supposed to be like a manager over leadership and coaching for the state. That was what happened initially. And so I accepted that offer. and went to work on this dream team for the governor's task force. And I was very excited to be in charge of leadership and of coaching. I had this passion for coaching for many years, and I actually told more of that story in a podcast I was recently a guest on with Heather Pridemore, Small Acts of Rebellion. People can tune into that if they want to hear about that. But suffice it for this conversation to say, I was raised in a family of coaches, and I myself had become educated as a coactive coach and had suggested at the time that we adopt this idea of coactive coaching into the child welfare system as our way of interacting with families. Unfortunately, in the past, when I had suggested it, people didn't really understand what I was talking about or know what I meant. And so nothing really happened with it. Well, now fast forward to 2013, and I'm a part of this dream team and I'm in charge of coaching. And so, don't you know, I'm going to make my dream a reality to make it coactive coaching and to really try to embed it into the system, because I really believed that this was the method, the process that is needed for us to activate real community change that genuinely truly helps people
Mm-hmm.
to change their lives in ways that are, important and sustainable. So I start work on this project, and at the time there were only like 3 or 5 of us on the team. It was all very grassroots, like being part of a startup company. And we got a couple of months into the program, and I remember I had gone on a small trip up to the mountains with my at the time boss, where we were to co-lead a workshop at a national conference on diversity and equity and reducing racism within the human serving systems. And she and I did that day together, and we got rave reviews from the audience about our offering. And the next morning we were having breakfast, and previous to this conference occasion that had us traveling to the mountains together, we had been interviewing for directors of the project, the governor's task force project. Um, and so then she and I co-led this day together that went resoundingly well. And the next morning we were eating breakfast, and I said to her, it occurs to me we're interviewing folks to become the director of this project, and I don't see really where they have anything in terms of experience or competence that I don't have. And so I guess I'm just wondering, why not make me the director? Which stunned us both, I think, that these words fell out of my mouth.
Yeah.
It felt like a really brave and bold move to me, for me,
Mm-hmm.
to identify myself as I think that I could run this entire project. And I think it felt like a really bold and brave move to her, for me too. But respectfully, she was willing to entertain it. And so she was like, okay, basically make the sale, convince me why it should be you.
Yeah.
And so I did. Again, I put together a little, PowerPoint deck presentation and talked about all of the reasons. Long story long, I guess, I got the job. And
Cool.
so I ended up being the director over this project. And somewhere in the middle of that, built a team of people where we started as a mighty team of 3 or 5. When I left, there were 35. We ended up going through together a whole nother grant cycle where another thing that I didn't know that I could do, had told myself I wouldn't have known how to do, was write a grant response and win the award. But we were granted another $25 million and another
Wow.
5-year cycle. Um, and I was able to realize my dream of integrating coactive coaching, because I was able to take anybody on my team who had a role where it was relevant, that wanted to go get trained and certified to become a coactive coach. I was allowed to support that for them. And so And I said at the time, I'm not on a mission to make all of you coaches. You don't even have to be a coach. But what I do want to have happen is I want to have every single one of you occupying your role here coactively.
Mm.
So if you're writing curriculum or facilitating training or actually coaching leaders or coaching our clients or coordinating our training, no matter what your role is in keeping this ship on the water, I want you to fulfill it coactively. And so I'm going to offer this
Can
training
you
opportunity to all of you. And most of them took it.
can you describe what coactively means?
Oh, yes. Great question.
Yeah.
So, the Coactive Training Institute was started by two people who are very dear to my heart, who you've heard me talk about before, because they also happen to be our leadership leaders
Hmm.
um, that Matt and I referenced. So, Karen Kimsey House and Henry Kimsey House um, came together with this idea. So, the co is feminine energy, it's the holding, the space that
Mm.
comes from, the kundalini, the nurturing, the creation of space where people can feel held and nurtured and loved, right?
Yeah.
And then the active is the masculine energy that wants to come through the co, like the action oriented, I want to get in the middle of the thing, penetrate the center. And then they would tell you, Henry and Karen, that the most important part of that word, coactive, is the hyphen in the middle,
Mm.
because it's the
Hmm.
part that connects.
Yeah.
It's the and, not the either or. And what they were able to create out of this theory of coactivity, that really seeks to hold and leverage the masculine and the feminine in everything that we all do. And it's in all of us. All of it is in all of us.
Mm.
And when you activate that, what you get is a real sense of relationship where power is shared. There's no better than or worse than. It's like us right in the space of that nuance that you and I have been talking a lot about,
Right.
where you lean into me and I lean into you, and both of us lean at 100%. So there's
Hmm.
nobody doing more than their 100, and there's no one doing less than their 100, because if that happens, we both fall.
Right.
And then conducting whatever the business is of your relationship from that space,
Hmm.
whether you're talking about a friendship, a marriage, a business partnership, whatever it is. It's we are here as co-creators to co-create and co-activate and co-hold with co-responsibility for everything, whatever it is that we're up to creating,
Interesting.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really incredible. Um, and then from that, they train people how to use that philosophy in coaching and how to lead your life from that philosophy as a leader. They've been very, very successful, because I think that what they're up to offering for us all is a way of being that we all really desire and long for.
Hmm.
And the struggle, I think, for most humans is that we don't really know um, how we're getting in our own way
Right.
of having that, you know.
And that can translate into relationships, into workplaces,
Hmm.
the amount of times whether you hear one half of a couple saying,
Hmm.
well, if they would just,
Yeah,
or in a workplace where they go, well, that other team didn't do their job. But
exactly.
so I love the co-active that we are all responsible for this.
Right. We are all equally responsible for this. We are both
Yeah.
100% responsible for this relationship.
Yeah.
And so,
Cool.
and then the follow up question to that might be, so how are you being your best?
Hmm. Hmm.
And it really is one of the cornerstones of this model is that we believe in something we call naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And what that means is that we believe that everyone is naturally creative, resourceful, and whole.
Yeah.
And when you operate from that place, it's like that's the part that keeps me owning my 100, but not more,
Cool.
right? Because I
Yeah.
don't have to fill in your blank because I don't see you as having a blank.
Yeah.
So I let you fill all of your space and I fill all of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And then together we come, right? But you can imagine, I mean, I'm sure you can imagine, as a human being and as a therapist, how we all have a whole bunch of ego driven human strategies that can get in the way of of this conceptually, what I'm describing.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, because you take one thing personally and you come out of being 100 because now you're over
Then
there like
we get into
licking
our
your
head.
own right because you're licking your wounds about your sensitivities because you took
Mm-hmm.
something personally,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or you think that you need to protect yourself by villainizing or blaming some other person in the group or on the team or in the room, and all of a sudden you're not holding your 100,
Right.
you know. So in this world, and this is one of the things that Henry taught me, in this world, we have to be willing to make our stake matter a whole bunch more than our shit.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
It's like, what have we come together to create? And that is all that matters.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's for me, this work, getting myself educated in this, at this school and by these people, both as a coach and as a leader, has been totally transformative. It's changed me,
Wow.
changed my life, changed my outlook on life, changed how I serve and interact with other people,
Mm-hmm.
and definitely prepared me for the enormity of the leadership role as well as it could. I still had some personal work I needed to do in order to occupy that role. And don't you know, my team became my teacher then.
We are
Uh,
never done.
we're never done. We're never done. But
Yeah.
it certainly planted some of the seeds that I needed to lift this thing up and off the ground in a successful way. And I'm really proud to say, as we sit here together today, that that team is all still alive and well. So I built the plane and got it in the air, and it's still flying.
Cool.
And I left, it's been 3 years ago now. So that feels like a really big win.
Yeah.
Um,
You left a legacy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I left a group of people who I know were totally capable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember one time, one of the first things I did after that breakfast I told you about, where I boldly said, "Make me the director." And then she boldly said, "Yes." My next move was to call my mom and go, "Holy shit. They're going to make me the director of this thing, and I'm not sure where to begin or what to do. Or, you know, I've got this thing in front of me. It's called a Gantt chart. I don't even know what that means. Like, how do I
What do
start?"
I do?
Exactly. And my mom, in all of her wisdom, said, "Hire a coach,"
Hmm.
um, which was genius. And so that's what I did. I hired a person to be my leadership coach who continued to be my leadership coach throughout the tenure of my work there, and ultimately became my one of my most dear and trusted friends and advisors in the world. Sadly, her name was Grace, and she passed away
Hmm.
just previous to that road trip that I told you about. She passed away in 2020, and losing her too was something for me that I took with me out on the soul quest, the soul search journey. Where do I go now, and who am I meant to be now? It's
Yeah.
funny to me as I reflect on all of this with you, um, how much of myself I've been able to discover in my life through really deep and meaningful relationships with others.
Mm-hmm.
That then, when those relationship ends for whatever reason, I get a little lost for a
Yeah.
while because I have to sort of rediscover who am I without them. And Grace was one of those people for me, for sure.
Was she part of the reason that you decided to actually use that PTO that you hadn't been using?
She definitely would have championed the hell out of that decision. Yeah. And when
Yeah.
I came home from that trip and used that PTO, I left this job. That was one of the
Hmm.
big moves that came from that road trip excursion journey. When I got back, it was another lesson from my dear Henry, who taught me responsible leaders know when it's time to sit down. And I was seeing some signals and I was feeling some wisdom in my own insides that let me know I've done what I came here to do.
Hmm.
I was chosen at the just right time for the just right reason because I was the leader that this thing needed in order to be built and like lifted up and gotten off the ground. That was where my strengths lived. Obviously, you know that I'm kind of big on things like inspiration
Hmm.
and idea generation and enrollment and setup sort of things. I believe that I did those parts really successfully. And once it got to a place where it was able to kind of, fly through the air with a little less, new construction, if you will, knew that it was time for me to exit the plane. And so I did. A whole lot's happened, and we've told some of the stories about um, the messy directions that my life and myself and my healing work has taken since those endings and that completion. But most importantly, it all led me back to you.
There is something so rare and so important about what happened with you is that you had achieved this level in your career that people really work hard to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like you have these golden handcuffs. You're there and it's like, well, where do I go from here? And our ego can say, you got to go up. You got to keep going up, go up, go up, go up, even if up isn't the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And you decided it was time to be the leader who sat down.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Because that is not a thing that as humans we naturally can do. Our
Yeah.
ego tells us, don't do it.
Yeah. I think my ego, I'm not different from other humans. I think my ego was screaming at me for a long time that it might have been time, even before I heard the signals and listened to them. And I did fight against it, I think, because of that same kind of thinking. Like, do they need me? Do I need this? Where would I possibly go from here? How could I work for someone else now that I've been the, kind of top of the pyramid or whatever? All of that sort of ego driven thinking. The truth really was for me, I didn't, um, I didn't feel like I had a choice because what was on the other side was either going to continue listening to the voices that fed what I would call that external hustle
Mm-hmm.
to my own detriment, or listen to the parts of my body that were truly screaming at me, that were saying, you cannot any longer sustain this level. Um, I had so much, let's just say, stuff swirling in me from a 25-year career in child welfare. You alluded a few minutes ago to the parallel process.
Yeah.
That's a real thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it includes trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So the trauma that I had brought with me personally, I think, to the child welfare arena, I had not ever really addressed or owned in a real way that was respectful of my harm and my healing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had worked, directly for 10 to 15 years in the field working with definitely traumatized children and families. And
Mm-hmm.
that's splashing all over as if I'm standing on the side of a pool with people dropping, trauma laden cannonballs into it, and including some of my own cases that were primarily traumatic, not
Right.
just secondarily traumatic. But I personally have, um, overseen matters where babies have been burned and beaten and battered. Um, not good stuff. Like all of these things cause harm. And then over into the training world, and you think that you're a little bit distant from it and free from it, but the truth is what you've got in those systems is, yeah, we're working in universities and out of government offices, but it's still all of the people with all of the trauma are the ones that are populating the seats around the conference table.
Right. And then
And
there's
so,
vicarious trauma, which
yeah,
is, I mean, my definition, which I'm sure could be more refined, is vicarious trauma is when you hear someone's story secondhand or even experience what's going on with them and you pick up on the feeling and then it becomes part of you. Like it's not your trauma, it is their trauma that they're bringing in, but it feels in your body like it's your trauma.
exactly. And here's some things I've learned about myself since that I didn't recognize or give conscious attention to at the time, but I'm a highly sensitive person.
Mhm.
I'm an empath.
Mhm.
At the time, if I'm being honest, I was really lacking in boundaries, is
Mhm.
what a lot of that means.
Yeah.
So I took on everybody's everything and felt it all very deeply. And you also still have grown up, highly educated adults that are very much still behaving within what I would call the trauma triangle, where I have to find who's the villain and the persecutor and the victim and the rescuer in every situation.
Mhm.
Um, all of that is to say, I was burned out. I went into this role really with a zest and an earnestness for like, I'm going to be a world change maker.
Mm.
My boots have been on the ground. I've seen the way that we make things dirty for families when our intent is to make it clean. And I know the solution. And I'm now in the role and I have the resources to make the solution real. Like I was alive with possibility.
Mhm.
And then I got around the conference tables and in the rooms with, and there for the conversations with. And to me, it seemed like I discovered a system that absolutely did not want to change. It liked how it is, it gets rewarded based on how it is.
Yeah.
Um, and furthermore, parts of it really didn't like me for speaking up and out against it
Right.
and suggesting that change is something it would want to embrace. And so I then, in some circles, became the villain, the one that people needed to make dirty, bad, or wrong in order for them to stay the
In
same.
that triangle,
Right,
you had to be the villain.
right, right. So, um, all of those dynamics above forementioned really did a number on me. um, that really I needed to, I just needed to be with for a while, and sort of pulling apart the spaghetti that is my own insides,
Mhm.
um, to discern what the truth is about me and for me and my reality and where my place is in the world and what my purpose is and all those just really
Yeah.
minor but also enormous existential questions.
Yeah.
But it's like we talked about before, the roles that we pick up and put on and identify with throughout our lives. One of mine was child welfare professional. And
Mhm.
of course, I think I chose that because there was a little child in me that always had wanted to be protected and saved.
Mhm.
And so I, I think maybe it's a healthy thing that I finally was able to say, I don't need to be here in this environment anymore.
Mhm. You had grown enough
Mm-hmm.
that you could go, "Wait a minute, this isn't for me."
Yeah. anymore. It was for a really long time, and it served a lot of. I'm grateful, truly, for my years and my
Hmm.
time in that work and with those people. I met you,
Yeah.
because of that work and those people. Some of my dearest lifelong friends. And I know that it's, especially for those who are still in it and still doing it, like I understand that they are going to work every day equipped with nothing but a heart full of loving intent to help make the world a better, safer place for kids and families. Um, I just know that in my case, it was personally harming, to do it for so long without the structures and resources and support available, without the awareness
Hmm.
available, that they teach. We had classes on secondary trauma and self-care, um, but as you and I know, that's not what we're talking about here.
Right.
Like, self-care isn't just about pedicures and bubble
No,
baths and keep a journal.
it's not about taking a day off of work.
Exactly. Exactly. It's about really doing the tough work of
Yeah.
laying all of your own wiring out to find who you really
Figuring out
are and
your
what you really
purpose,
need.
living by your values,
Yeah.
having the boundaries to
Yeah.
go, there's only so much I can do, and I
Yeah.
can't be available at all hours and doing everything because it's not humanly possible and it is a moving target.
Right. Right. Busy as a sign of honor, as a badge of honor, needs
Mhm.
to become a historical artifact.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I really believe what I'm about to say. Um, when you sacrifice yourself for the sake of something you believe to be bigger than you, it's always false.
Mm.
Like, for me, um, healing the world begins with healing myself. Loving the world begins with loving myself.
Mhm.
Being a caregiver and a servant leader to others in the world starts with great care of self and service to self.
That makes me want to ask you, have you stopped and given yourself credit for the change that you did create while you were in your 25 years in child
Mm,
welfare in all of the various roles? Have you given yourself credit?
wow. Thank you for asking the question. And the honest answer is no.
Mm.
Um, and I really would like to, because I think I've mentioned this to you before. When I was on my way out and leaving my team, at the when I retired from my career in child welfare is how I want to shape that up.
Mhm.
Um, my team prepared a beautiful, like, wooden, very special box of memories, and inside it are little slips of paper where they all wrote messages, like, of things in a varying, some form of what I meant to them.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, and I've not yet read through the slips of paper in that box.
Do you
It's been
think you
3
could
years.
do that?
I would very much like to do that. Yeah, I want to see what they say, and I have a feeling that it's going to be, really emotional for me.
Mhm.
And even as I say these words to you, I think this is a little bit evidentiary of me being kind of stuck in pain,
Mhm.
where, I've been in a hurt place. I've been telling myself a hurt story because I'm not really in contact with many or any of them anymore.
Yeah.
And it's inside my mind, it's been this thing of, I wonder what I could make up that they're thinking about me or whatever, that they're not in contact, and then I can feel really hurt about that. And I think when I read these love notes, the truth might come out.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that it's, you know, even more touching, more emotionally, opening for me to feel love than it is some of the harmful stuff. What do you think about that?
I
Like,
think
self love makes me weepy.
All of it, yes. And we have, there's this the attachment to the story of what it was and the
Hmm.
attachment to the pain.
Hmm.
And it could be really healing to open that up and read the notes and the messages people had for you to help you go to have a different story about
Yeah.
it. Like, I gave what I could and I did have an impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
I left something beautiful behind because I gave it what I could. I grew that garden in the best
Hmm.
way possible. It
Hmm.
was beautiful and luxurious, and I couldn't get those tomato plants any higher. And
Yeah.
so the next gardener had to come in
Yeah.
because they had a skill I didn't have, and it was time for me to go and start a new garden. And
Yeah.
so I I want you, whether it was with me or on the podcast or by yourself or with anyone else, I want you to read that. You deserve to read the
Yeah.
words that people have said to you about the impact you've made.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can help. Maybe we can make that another episode. What do you think?
I think so. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'm
I
down for
I
it
would
because
be
you'll help
honored.
hold me accountable.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's a funny thing because I don't really feel I'm not actively avoiding it,
No.
that I like not in my conscious mind. And yet I have moved in the last like 3 years. I've moved probably 7 times,
Right.
and I've carried this box with me everywhere, in and out. Like it's almost a little treasure that I'm there's some sort of reticence to opening the lid and looking down in, but I can feel that it's a treasure that I have carried with me through 5 or 7 moves. So,
I
yeah,
think it needs to be something very purposeful
okay.
that you like.
Ceremonial.
It's not like I'm just going to pull out the box and read these, but like
Yeah.
make it an event,
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Okay.
party.
Let's make it a SoulStirred event.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. That'll be really vulnerable, but I'll do it because you'll be there.
Yeah. I'll be there for you
Yeah.
and celebrating you.
Okay. I'm down for
Yeah.
it. I think it's time. I think yeah, I've been on the show with you all morning, sort of preaching about the importance of letting our feelings move,
Hmm.
and inviting people into this sort of movement. And I myself need to heed the call,
Yes.
and let whatever it is that shall remain nameless at this moment, but whatever it is I'm feeling about that chapter in my life wants to move through me to
Mm.
create the space for whatever's meant next to come in.
Yep.
And
Clear it out.
I will gladly accept your help with that effort and your love and support as I do it.
Okay. I'm going to keep you accountable to that, just
I
so
know
you
you
know.
will. I know you will. Don't ask Emily to be your accountability partner unless you really want to be held accountable.
Ah, it's not just words. I mean it.
It was cool to live my story too.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, and I would love for us to just sort of bring this episode to a close with a big shout out to all of the men and women and people, persons that we know who are serving the world in some sort of human service, profession,
Hmm.
because you really do make a difference,
You do.
and your presence really does matter.
Hmm.
um, and you're getting to do work that most people say they could never do, and that's you were chosen for that because of your specialness and because of your uniqueness, and also permission to take really good care of yourself along the way.
Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Meaning, boundaries,
Yeah.
laughter.
Playfulness,
Yes.
creativity, gratitude,
Community.
community, seeking people out and not having to be anything other than who you really are and how you really feel.
Hmm.
Find your tribes of people that you can be your most authentic self with and never leave them.
Yeah.
um, just know that you are loved, and what you do matters.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's that. I love it.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you for creating the space for me to share these parts of my heart with you today.
Yes, you're so welcome. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for your vulnerability.
SoulStirred listeners, thank you so much for joining us today as we bring you stories of growth in the human experience. We appreciate you, and we have a request for you. If you will take 30 seconds to do these 3 things for us. 1, follow or subscribe to SoulStirred Podcast. This makes sure you never miss an episode and helps us to make sure you never miss an episode. Head over to your preferred platform, click the SoulStirred Podcast show page, and click the plus sign or the follow button. Second, we'd love it if you could give us a 5-star rating while you're there. Finally, choose your favorite episode and share it with a friend.
We're so grateful to all of our listeners for your continued support helping SoulStirred grow and ultimately inspire others through authentic connection. Don't hesitate to reach out with ideas, stories, or questions. We are always eager to hear from you. Our email and social links are found in every episode's show notes. Until next time, keep stirring your soul and embracing your journey.
Take good care of yourselves and of each other. Bye-bye.